Hey, this is Chris Vinnicombe and this is episode 6 of The Gear Show from the people behind Guitarist, Total Guitar and Guitar Techniques magazines and MusicRadar.com. This month we're checking out a whole load of new gear that was launched at NAMM 2015 in Anaheim. We've got demos of new affordable Fender, Jaguar and Jazzmaster guitars with nitrocellulose finishes, the Taylor 600 series and Blackstar's Beam. We'll also be checking out the PRS 30th Anniversary Custom 24, Cort's MBC1 Matthew Bellamy signature model, and on top of all that, we go backstage with Slash's guitar tech to check out his live rig. First up, Neville, Marten and myself get our hands on the rather beautiful Dutchburst Les Paul from Gibson's Collector's Choice range. Hi, this is Chris from Guitarist.
And I'm Neville from Guitarist.
And we're here to check out the Gibson Custom Collector's Choice number 18 Dutchburst guitar that Neville's holding there. So I guess the first thing that we should do for you guys at home is explain a little bit about the instrument and what the Collector's Choice is. So over to you, Nev.
Collector's Choice is over and above the usual reissue series. Gibson actually have taken some actual guitars owned by people, and they've, as near as they possibly can, given the materials available today, recreated them. They've recreated the dents, the dings, the marks. They've gone for the grain of wood that's as close as possible to the original. They've shaded the sunburst exactly as closely as they can to the original, and so these have a real vibe of a genuine vintage guitar, and I think over and above the reissue series, which are generically aged.
Mm-hmm. So what's the story behind the Dutchburst then?
They've all got names, which is really quite interesting. Chris is holding Spoonful Burst. Jeff at World Guitars has kindly loaned us this as a comparison for this one. This is another collector's choice. This is called Spoonful Burst and was once owned by John Sebastian of the Loving Spoonful. This was a working guitar owned by a Dutch guy. We only know him as Jan, and he owned this, and it was bought in 1961, I think. And so he was the first owner, and it worked all his life on the cruise ships around the world. He was in a jazz trio, and it's just that all of these dents, all of this aging has come about because Jan's hands have been up and down that neck over here. He's rested it on something there and dented it there. Obviously something clouted it there, possibly a microphone or a bottle chucked from the audience, but this is a recreation of Jan's actual guitar.
Okay.
A 1960 Les Paul.
Yeah, and I guess actually the fact that it's based on a 60 is one of the interesting things, because obviously I would imagine that the lion's share of business that Gibson Custom do with the burst reissues is the 59s and then maybe the 58s, and then I'm guessing probably the 60 is perhaps less fashionable, but they do have a very different neck shape. So let's just talk about that.
I think you're right, Chris. I think 59 is the number one, and they're usually the most expensive, and then 58 are a little bit cheaper because the tops usually aren't quite as fancy. Mm-hmm. And some people don't like the bigger neck that the 58's got. The 59 is somewhere in between. This 60's got a very narrow neck. I had a 61 335 that had an even narrower neck than this, but some people think this might be a little bit too thin for a Les Paul, but actually we've both been playing it for quite a while now, and it's so nice to play. The interesting thing for me, which was quite of a shock really, because Les Pauls are always a bit of a struggle up here because you can't get your thumb up there, but because the neck's thinner and because it goes into the crook of the heel of the neck a little bit further, all of a sudden playing in the A position up here is just that little bit easier. Compare it to that one,
yeah, definitely.
And it's definitely easier. And I found that a bit of a revelation. It also affects the sound. because this has the same pickups as that pretty much, both made of maple, mahogany and rosewood, of course, but this has got a lighter, more articulate tone than that. That's what more you'd imagine a Les Paul to be, very brown and dark and in your face. This is more articulate, sweeter treble at the top, a bit brighter overall, but I mean, you like this as well, and that, don't you?
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to say as well, obviously it's something that you can't see on video, but this is actually quite a bit heavier than that, and so I would imagine that the thinner neck shape and the weight both have a contributing factor when it comes to the tone. So shall we hear a little bit of what that can do?
Okay. I'll go on the bridge pickup here, and I'll turn the volume down a little bit, and just you can hear what it sounds like. So it's quite articulate. There's a lot of brightness in the top there, but it's really nice. If I turn it up to full, it's got a lovely darkness to it as well, but it's not mushy, because some of them can be a bit kind of, I always call it like an unstoppable express train. You can't do much with it. But when you turn that right down, it really cleans up nicely.
I think there's probably a lot more brightness and jangle on tap there than anyone who kind of grew up on the Les Paul standards of the 1990s would expect, for instance, because I always think they were much more of a blunt instrument, you know, loads of mid-range punch, loads of big kind of syrupy bottom end, but nothing like the jangle that's got. And of course, we should mention the Matchless Nighthawk amplifier, which is certainly, not inhibiting it in the slightest.
It's a brilliant amp. It just sounds... We've done a couple of tracks this morning. Actually, I've used this for my blues headlines this month, because it was here, and we used the Matchless as well, and on both occasions the tone from the Les Paul just slotted straight into the track. Haven't had to do anything. It's almost like it's the last piece of the jigsaw puzzle, just gone straight in there. Haven't had to add loads of compression and loads of weird things. It just slots right in, and it's brilliant. Okay, I'll flip over to the neck pickup now with the tone control wide open. So it's much warmer, but there's still clarity.
It's definitely got a level of treble that you perhaps wouldn't associate with that classic kind of thick sort of almost Bonamassa style, mid-rangey neck pickup sound. Should we actually plug this one in and just hear a direct comparison? So if you pass me the lead. And so this one, obviously heavier body, slightly bigger neck, and I'd say personally there's a much kind of smokier, kind of more classic Les Paul neck pickup sound. You know, maybe not what people hear in their heads perhaps a little more when they think of a Les Paul neck pickup. I mean, if we just sort of do a direct comparison, around about that sort of position. Definitely a bit more quack, isn't there? And a bit.
You might not be able to hear that so well on the recording, but you definitely can hear it in the room. And actually, as the amp goes louder, the differences seem to come out more. I think.
I think it's something as well that in isolation it can almost sound like a lighter sound and perhaps not as full and not as rich, but actually when you put that in a mix, I think it's a lot easier to EQ, a lot easier to position in some ways, because this is so thick and so fat that you do have problems sometimes getting it to cut through, whereas that we didn't have to do anything to it. It just instantly sat in the right place.
Why people use single coil so much, because they just work it in a mix, and why sometimes the fatter sound of a humbucker can struggle to sit in a mix, and also is why the classic rock sounded so great, because they weren't overladen with overdrives and literally you had your Les Paul into a Marshall. It's going to sound naturally bright, and it sat perfectly in the mix.
Similarly, actually, I'd like to just sort of just demonstrate the bridge pickup of this guitar, and then so you can hear that as well, because there's quite a big difference. So here you've got that kind of. So the top end is there, but it's definitely softer, isn't it? Especially
It is, yeah. It is. I can't really work out where the mid, whether it's lower mid range or upper mid range or something, but it's definitely slightly different. Thinking of, we were talking about Thin Lizzy earlier on, and I think the sound of this is the solo in Still in Love with You. The sound of that is more Boys Are Back in Town.
Yeah.
That's a bit more in your face, not taking any prisoners. This is a bit more delicate.
Definitely. I guess one of the things that people at home will want to know as well is, this is list price of 5,799. An ordinary R9 would cost you approximately 4.5.
Yeah.
What are you getting for the money, do you think,
I think, well, it's hard to say what you're getting for the money. You're getting the fact that Gibson goes out to wherever this guitar is, or the guitar is shipped to Gibson, and they must spend an awful lot more time doing the work, because to actually copy a specific guitar ding by ding, wear mark by wear mark, is an awfully big job. I mean, it's not like, let's stick a few dings there, let's do that, a bit around there.
Yeah.
It's literally saying, okay, let's analyse this guitar. Also, the amount of time and trouble they go to selecting the woods. Somebody's got to spend a lot of time in Gibson's wood store sorting out the type of figuring of the top. I mean, if you look at all the pictures of the various Dutchbursts, they're not all identical, but they've all got this narrow, quite flickery stripe. And I'm sure if you look at all the pictures of the spoonful bursts, they'll all be very, 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 very close to one another. So it's that kind of detailing, and the volume and tone have worn off the insets in here. So somebody's got to do that. Okay, it probably might only take half an hour, because they just don't use a bit of sandpaper. They do it pretty properly. But there are specific dents and wear marks all over it, and these have got to be done by hand. That's not stamped out or put on a CNC router to do. And these wear on the neck, it's very specific wear marks. And
and if you compare that to that, obviously there's much lighter wear there.
Absolutely.
There's just a sort of a patch there, and these kind of very specific dings that are patterned up there.
Yeah.
I think the individuality of these instruments is perhaps where the extra sort of price premium comes in. But another thing that means is that if you're in the market for a collector's choice guitar, I think we both said earlier on that you need to go into a shop and play a bunch of them, and find the one that really speaks to you, because based purely on visual appeal alone, like this for me with the Dirty Lemon Burst every single day of the week, I absolutely love the way this looks. I think that I like a bigger neck, but then picking up the Dutchburst, actually that guitar sounds that much more in keeping with what I'd like to get from a Les Paul. The neck shape as well, it definitely brings something else to the table. I think you've just got to play them side by side, really.
You wouldn't know it if you just ordered it online. Not that I'm doing an anti-online or a pro shop, but if you're spending this kind of money, you want the thing in your hand. You don't want to say, oh yes, I'll have that, please send it to me in a cardboard box. Because they do sound different, and even the graining, you think actually, I'm really liking this Dark Sunburst, and I'm usually like you. I usually go for the classic, the kind of the old Peter Green look of a Les Paul, but I really like that. But you need to play them, because that little tiny difference. I recently bought a Telecaster, and I tried 3. Had I bought it online, I would have bought that one. In the shop, that was the one I liked the least. The one I liked the best was the most expensive, and I wasn't going to pay for it, so I went for the one that hit the middle ground visually and price-wise.
Well, what always happens to me if I play a bunch of the same model of guitar is that I always like the one that I like the look of least. I don't know why, but the one that I look at and think, wow, that looks amazing, it's always the one that doesn't sound as good, and it's just like, God, every single time.
I know. But, people watching this, some people prefer that because they want that mallet in the face sound. Some people would prefer this, like you, because you want something that's more articulate, more of an indie kind of sound than a kind of brick wall kind of sound.
Yeah, and I think maybe some more of that sort of 60s beat group kind of feel with that top end as well is what attracts me to it. It's not a sledgehammer, it's much more of there's much more jangly kind of trebly textures that you can get, whereas this I think this is the collector's choice Les Paul for people who are, into more of the Bonamassa thing, more of that big syrupy mid-range, smoky blues tones and things like that.
That's right. But you watch Keith Richards strumming on his Les Paul the last time with the Rolling Stones. That was a Les Paul being used as a J160E. And it sounded great.
So, while we're on the subject of exhaustive replication of vintage features, what about the pickup covers, Neville?
I wasn't going to mention the pickup covers because I am a bit of a pickup cover radiusing bore, but the pickup covers Gibson have been using for quite a while now aren't the right... Well, they're not the shape that they were originally. There's more of a radius on them, and the corners are slightly too rounded. But I believe you have a bit of information about something Gibson might be doing.
I do, yes. So while we were very recently at the NAMM show in Anaheim, there were a couple of guitars on the wall in the Gibson custom section, which were described as concept guitars, so not yet in production. And a couple of Les Pauls, and essentially what they've done is examine 50s originals in even more microscopic detail than ever, which includes the radiusing of the pickup covers. It includes even down to how rough or smooth the scratch plate feels, and all of those very, very tiny details that make real vintage obsessives get hot under the collar. So I think really it's a case of watch this space with what Gibson Custom does for the remainder of 2015, because it could well be that those concept instruments actually go into production. So keep an eye on Guitarist for news of that one.
That's great. I mean, actually, these don't look bad at all because they're virtually flush to the pickups around, so you don't see that radiusing. But it is interesting what you say. I mean, I always people used to moan about the finish along the side of the headstock used to be orange peely, and they weren't flattened down and sanded and buffed, but the originals weren't. If you look at an old 59 Les Paul, my old 335s, they were bobbly because probably Gibson thought, well, if you start sanding and buffing there at the very last minute, you could potentially have to go back and start all over again to refinish it. So they probably left it for very functional reasons.
Well, as we've previously said, we're in a unique industry where such shortcomings are seen as desirable. But
exactly. Yes, Mr. BMW, can you make my car with rust all around the sills, please? And other cars with rust are available.
Okay, so obviously we've said a lot about the range of sounds that are on offer from these things, over and above what people's stereotypical idea of a Les Paul might be. So do you want to show us a few more sounds?
Well, neck pickup, I will, of course. A neck pickup turned down to about 5 there. Bridge.
I think the natural voice of that guitar is so good for that really kind of attacking, kind of digging in, like bridge pickup blues thing.
Let's try. I haven't tried woman tone yet, Neck pickup, tone all the way down. See, that's a light. That's not really. Maybe I haven't got enough gain on it, but normally you'd expect that to drive more. But
it's more of a catwalk.
Quite synthesizer-y. Try it on the...
One thing I always feel that these custom shop instruments have, definitely in every position, everything just seems that little bit more effective and more usable and more musical than it does on perhaps, the sort of standard production line Les Paul, because all of those sounds that maybe you think, oh, I don't know, this is a little bit woolly, or I'm not sure if I can get away with this. When you go up to the custom shop level, they do seem to kind of, everything seems that bit more usable, that bit more musical perhaps.
Well, very often the standard pickups are wound a little bit hotter, in my experience, because that appeals to a lot of people. They like a Les Paul particularly, or Les Paul type guitars. They like them to be quite hot, and the custom shop instruments, the pickups aren't usually so hot, and that makes them a little bit more articulate. It means you can crank the amp up one more notch, so everything's working a bit more coherently together, cohesively together. So I think, yeah, you're quite possibly right. I don't know the facts of it, but that's always my impression when sometimes they feel, oh, this is a bit overwhelmed for me, and it's doing what a lot of people would expect a Les Paul to do. But if you listen to lots of the old tracks, I've said this many times before, they're actually not as distorted and not as heavy as you think they are. But the tone is so lovely and it sits in the mix so well, and it's mated perfectly with the right amplifier, that it sounds brilliant, and you think it's distorted, and often it isn't. Bluesbreakers, Clapton's not distorted on that, just very, very loud. Van Halen's not overly distorted, he's just very, very loud. And often people make the mistake of trying to pile on the gain, pile on the distortion, whereas the tone actually is all in the guitar.
Yeah. Great. So I think we're both sold. We both love this.
Yeah, we are. Yeah.
If you guys at home are thinking about buying one, what do you think, Nev? Do you think this is something that's, given the Collector's Choice series, is this something that's going to appreciate in value over time?
Who really knows what any guitar's going to do? But you would have to say that because of their restricted nature, and they're only going to make as many as they can, given the woods that they can find that are as similar to the originals as possible, and they must take an awful lot of time to make. So they're going to be much more limited in number, and so therefore, and they are specific guitars. They're made from specific guitars. So, you know, I'm not going to say in 3 years' time it'll be worth more, but who knows what in 30 years' time, 20 years' time.
And I guess the message is, in that interim period, in that 20 or 30 year period, don't just put the thing in a glass case and, you know, treat it like a baby and mollycoddle it. Get out there and play it. You know? You've
got to play it. It's what they're for. Gibson's a musical instrument making company, not your investment broker. And okay, they're done pretty well by a few people over the years, but that's not their sole purpose in life. These are superb musical instruments, and they're already dented up a bit, so it won't matter if you give them a few more.
Hi, my name's Ace. I'm Slash's guitar tech. We're here on the World on Fire tour. Towards the end, we're December 2014, so this isn't the end of the World on Fire tour, it's the end of the first European leg. I've been with Slash 3.5 years now. It's been a great time. It's been non-stop. I came in right when we started recording Apocalyptic Love, so right at the end of the self-titled world tour. I worked a little bit on Apocalyptic Love, doing guitar setups and stuff, and then I did the Apocalyptic Love tour, and I was pretty involved in the World on Fire album, and now we're on the World on Fire tour. Before I worked for Slash, right before I worked for Slash, I was with Anthrax doing all the big 4 shows in Europe with Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer. And before that, I worked with Danzig for a few years, High on Fire, Glenn Campbell, Dimmu Borgir, a whole lot of metal bands mostly, doing a lot of club shows and festivals and stuff. It was a great time. And then I worked my way up to here. Well, the first and most important thing in the signal chain wears a top hat, and that would be Slash. None of it sounds like the way it does without him. You know, everyone wonders how we do it. It's all in him. Slash plays a Les Paul, as most of you probably know. Our Les Pauls are fairly common features on our Les Pauls, a few little things we trick out here and there. From there it goes through, we use cables on stage. We're not on the wireless anymore. We use Mogami cables. Going straight into, I have one of his signature wahs, the new one, on the there on the downstage edge right next to the ego riser for him to use. From there, there's a cable runs back to my world. In my world, the first thing he hits is the rack wah. So he runs both his wah and a rack wah so I can have another wah out there for him to use. The rack wah is very adjustable. It's another Dunlop product, Crybaby, and I dialed it in to match his wah so the two sound the same. And then coming out of the rack wah, it goes into my pedal board. Well, the first thing it hits is my Palmer Triage Swisher, and what that does is I have one channel that goes to the acoustic when we use the double neck, so that goes straight into the DI, straight into the board. So I have one channel acoustic. The second channel I leave open as a mute, so I can mute the guitar to do guitar changes, or if I have to swap out of anything real quick, I can mute it. And then the third channel goes right into the board and into the amps and everything. That's our electric channel. The first thing in that signal path is we use the MXR Custom Audio Electronics line booster, the single knob version. So I have that dialed in, usually at about 11 dB a boost. So that gives him a little, I use that to punch up solos, to help him get feedback, stuff like that, anytime we need to bring him out in the mix. Well, I'll hit that thing, mostly solos. And then after that is my phaser. We'll use the phaser in Halo. So if we ever play Halo, it's in the bridge of Halo. And that's the only place we really use the phaser right now. Next to the phaser is the new Octave Fuzz, the MXR Octave Fuzz, the Slash signature one that came out about 2 years ago on the Apocalyptic Love. When we were recording that, they were developing the pedal at the same time. That sounds great. I love that pedal. That gives me, it's both a fuzz, so it fuzzes up the sound, and it'll do an octave below and an octave above. We use that mostly in Paradise City, in a little bit of Shadow Life, and also in the solo to No More Heroes from the Apocalyptic Love album. And then we'll use that in Watch This also, if we ever do that, from the self-titled album. And we'll also use it in, if we ever do Carolina, the Talkbox solo has some octave fuzz on it. Next to that is the tremolo pedal. We use that at the beginning of Shadow Life. It's, you know, the wah, 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 kind of almost a Leslie effect. We'll use that at the beginning of Shadow Life, and then if we ever do Jizz the Pit, or if we use, or we also use that in Far and Away off Apocalyptic Love. So, and then next to that is the delay. We have a very standard Boss DD3 delay. Digital, but very old school digital, very simple. I dial in the delay myself, you know, on the fly. We use that at the top in the bridge of Rocket Queen. So at the beginning, and then when he goes to the slide parts, there's delay on both of those. And then we also use that at Slither, also at the top of the song, to give it that spacey effect, and then in the bridge right before he goes into the solo. You know, there's delay on both those spots. He used to use a little bit of slapback delay on his on the solos, but we don't use that right now, and these rooms we're playing are so big we don't really need it. There's plenty of slapback in this arena already. And then last of all, I have a chorus, and we'll use that at the beginning of Paradise City, and we also use that in Bent to Fly, and also Jizz the Pit if on the rare occasion we play that song. And that's the full, that's all the pedals I use. I also have a Crybaby Q Zone, which is sort of like a wah pedal sound, but it's fixed, so you dial in. It's like if you could set your wah in one position, turn it on and turn it off, and we'll use that and let it roll. And they don't make those anymore, so I hang on to those when I find them. Fun fact. But that's not in the signal chain. I only keep that there in case, and I keep the spare and everything. I have spares for everything on the tour. After the pedals, the signal goes underneath the board where I have a Custom Audio Electronics line buffer and splitter. And what that does, it gives me 3 dB a boost to make up for a little bit of what's lost in all the capacitance and all those long cables and then running through the pedal board. So I have 3 dB a boost coming off of that thing. And then it also has a high and low cut. I don't use either of those. I don't use it to color the sound. But that'll split my signal. And then that runs into 2 JCM 800s. We're using JCM 800s this tour. I have 4 of them out here. 2 are on at any time. The other 2 are spares. We got one batch of them before the Apocalyptic Love tour and then one batch before this tour, but they're all the vintage reissue, so they're all made in the last 3 or 4 years. We used to use 6550 tubes in them, but now we're moved on to EL34s. You get a little bit more gain at a little bit lower volume level. So they're a little crunchier this tour, but we're not using the AFD 100s, which are much crunchier. So we kind of split the difference with the heads on this tour. And they have a slight mod to them. They have a potentiometer wired into the input stage that is wired to a resistor, so it'll kind of open the amp and make it either spongier or tighter. It's not really a gain thing. So the heads sound very close to a stock JCM 800. That's what we used as sort of our guideline. We used a stock JCM 800 and made it just a little bit different than that. And those heads get the same signal. It's dual mono. We don't run stereo effects, or it's not wet dry or anything like that. And then from there we have Palmer DIs that go after the heads, so we can get a DI signal into the board, so we can use that in some of the guys' in-ear mixes, and they can use it in front of houses if they want to. And then it runs into that big wall of cabinets you see on stage. All my cabinets are real and have speakers in them. I only use 2 at a time, however. So in essence, I'm running 2 half stacks, and then the rest is spares. And then those are, they're pretty much the same as the Marshall 1960 BV cabinets, but they're 1960 BV SL, so slash, and that's the different grill cloth and the trucker grill on the front of them. So that they're cosmetically different, but otherwise the same as the vintage 30 equipped Celestion Marshall cabinets. We use the bottoms, the straights. And then from there it goes into a pair of SM57 Shure microphones and into the console and into the PA. And that's pretty much the signal chain. Well, the Guild Double Neck is by far the oldest guitar we have out on tour, so it shows its age a little bit. It's well maintained and it's a great guitar. I just have to pay a little bit more attention to it. And then the fact it's acoustic and electric, it's, you know, twice the guitars in one package, so it's got 2 necks and everything. So it's not hard to maintain. It's just, it takes a little bit more attention than the other ones. And then, you know, the headstocks are this far apart from each other, so you got to really reach in there, and I prick my hands changing the strings on that sometimes, but that's part of the job. Yeah, any parts that wear out, I'll change them out. I'll change out bridges, pickups, pots, jacks, anything that's starting to, you know, we do a lot of shows and the guitars take a beating. You know, it's easier to replace stuff when it starts to look like something's gonna go wrong, as opposed to when something actually does go wrong. So, you know, I'm always rotating stuff out on them and maintaining them. It's a constant job, but it's fine, you know, it keeps them fresh, as it were. And they do get beat up, like cosmetically you can see that there's chips in them and dings and buckle rash, but that's part of their character. You know, we bring out all guitars that are intended to tour with. We don't tour with real 59 Les Pauls or anything that, you know, would lose value by being used. I'd say the worst thing that happens to us is sometimes when we're overseas in remote locations, we'll get power that's not ideal, and it can cause strain on the head. So I've had the head sound darker than I wanted to. I mean, just about everything's failed at one point or another. You know, I've had pedals die, guitars die. You know, in over hundreds and hundreds of shows, all these things will die at one point or another, but I have spares for everything. So except the guys in the band. No, nobody in the band's died, knock on wood. Todd did have an injury and had to sit out a few shows at one point before I joined the band. But yeah, the guys are obviously unreplaceable. But yeah, everything else, if it goes down, I grab the backup and then I fix it the next day. We've never had to cancel a show because of gear, and the worst thing that's ever happened is, you know, either we'll have to, you know, suck it up with bad amps, or maybe I'll have 10, 15 seconds while I'm switching something out, which feels like an eternity on stage and definitely is not ideal and not what we want to happen. But fortunately, we haven't had any catastrophes.
Now here's Taylor on Taylor as Mick gets his hands on the new 600 series.
Hi, Mick here for Guitarist magazine, and we have a demo of the new Taylor 600 series. We've got the 618E Grand Orchestra and the 614 CE Grand Auditorium. Now, Taylor 600 series has traditionally been with a solid spruce top and solid maple back and sides. However, for 2015, head luthier Andy Powers has gone about a complete belt and braces redesign of the whole 600 series, taking some cues from the 800 series redesign from last year, and applying some of those changes to the 600. So as well as tweaked top and back bracing, actually the back bracing is quite significant, and you can read more about that in issue 391 of Guitarist. Perhaps the biggest change is the visual change. If you look at the maple here, solid big leaf maple back and sides, and it's been treated to a burnished finish, which makes it this really lovely deep colour. Taylor's trying to evoke the spirit of perhaps traditional classical instruments such as violin, to get you thinking slightly differently about maple. Another thing that Taylor is doing with the new 600 series for the first time is torrefaction, which is essentially baking the solid spruce tops. You've seen this in other guitar manufacturers, they do it on the maple of the necks and some fingerboards. Taylor does it to how Andy Powers describes a medium rare level, so not very much baking, but it gives the spruce a slightly darker visual look, and he says it also puts a year or two's aging on the top, so it just feels like a played guitar when you take it out of the case. The major motivation for the 600 series redesign is all about sustainability. Taylor is aware, as is every other major guitar company in the world, that the supplies of mahogany and rosewoods, the traditional backs and sides woods that we all know and love, isn't that great. It's around for a while yet, but really if we want to think 20, 30 years down the line about sustainable timbers, sustainable solid timbers for backs and sides, maple's in a pretty good position. It's grown all over the world, it's grown particularly successfully in North America. This is a big leaf maple variety. So Taylor's taking a long-term view on it, wants us all to get thinking differently about maple acoustic guitars, and so has redesigned these instruments to help do that. We're going to have a listen to them. I'm going to play some strummed parts, some fingerpick parts and some flat pick parts on the two guitars, and just for comparison I've also got a 2012 spec 714 CE, so that's essentially the same guitar as the Grand Auditorium, but it's in solid spruce top and solid rosewood back and sides. Again, the new 600 series is all about solid spruce top, solid maple back and sides. So captions will come up so you can see which one is which, but let's have a listen to how they sound.
Next up, we find out what's in store with GAK in Brighton.
Hi, it's Josh Allen from GAK. What I've got with me right here is the Seymour Duncan 805 Overdrive pedal. Now we're checking this out today. We're going to be running this Telecaster through it. It's just a basic overdrive, but for me, it's one of my personal favorites. It just sounds absolutely awesome. We've got the level, we've got the drive, and then you've got your band EQ, you've got your bass, middle, and treble, and then obviously your big on and off switch there. Takes 9 to 18 volts. You've got your in and your out at the top there as well. So yeah, let's plug it in and see what it sounds like.
Hi, this is Chris from Guitarist, and I'm here with a quartet of brand new Fenders launched at NAMM 2015. The classic series 60s Lacquer, Jaguar and Jazzmaster both come with gloss nitrocellulose finishes and American vintage pickups. The road-worn 60s Jaguar and Jazzmaster also come with American vintage pickups and have aged nitro finishes. The first thing that you're going to hear is all 4 guitars in the context of a full track. After that, you'll hear some sound bites in isolation that illustrate the difference between the Jaguar and Jazzmaster pickups. Hope you enjoy it. Next up, Michael Brown tries to find his muse with the Cort MBC1 Matthew Bellamy signature guitar.
Hi, it's Michael from Guitarist, and we're here with the Cort MBC1, signature model for Muse frontman Matt Bellamy. Designed by Hugh Manson and Matt in the UK, and produced in Indonesia by Cort, the MBC1 packs a Manson bridge humbucker and neck single coil, matte black finish on a basswood body, and kill button for stutter effects. In this demo, we'll demonstrate a few of the guitar's tones in isolation before showcasing them in a full track. We're playing through an Orange Dual Dark 50 and Marshall JTM 45 Mark II.
Towards the end of last year, Blackstar invited us to their HQ in Northampton to get a very special sneak preview of the Beam before its launch at the NAMM show.
Hi, it's Josh Allen from gak.co.uk. What I have with me today is the Fender Custom Shop P90 Telecaster. There's a couple of things that are not as, your standard Telecaster sort of configuration on this guitar. There's a couple of bits on here that are a bit different, been changed, just to make it something a little bit different, and something a little bit nicer, a little bit different, as I said. So what we have on this guitar, in terms of looks, straight away, you've got your double bound body here, which is always a really, really lovely thing for me. I love those sort of double bound tellies instead of having a body carve or anything like that. For me, I just like it to be a slab of wood, really nice piece of gear there. What we have in the bridge, in terms of pickups wise, we've got a Billy Gibbons in the form of a single coil, obviously, as you can see there. And then we've got a Gibson P90 in the neck. So that's a really nice sort of setup of pickups to go with each other. They're not sort of low output, they're relatively aggressive in terms of the bridge especially. Standard telly configuration, you've got the volume and you've got the tone, and then you've got the three-way selector switch. A 60s profile oval neck on that. So it's really comfortable for most hands, especially mine. I haven't got the biggest hands, so that's a really, really nice sort of comfy feel to it. I've got a slab rosewood fretboard as well, so it's just a one-piece, nice thick piece of rosewood on there. And then obviously, as you can see, Fender Custom Telecaster, and on the back you get your Fender Custom Shop stamp. You also get a certificate of authenticity when you get a Fender Custom Shop, which is always a nice thing to have, keeping around with the guitar in its case. So that's a really lovely aspect to it as well. So I mean, yeah. So let's give it a go. We're going to run through some cleans and we're going to run through some overdrive tones as well. The sounds are coming courtesy of Orange. I'm using a TH30 straight into the amp. So yeah, let's see what it sounds like.
Here's Mick Taylor with the PRS 30th Anniversary Custom 24.
Hi, Mick here for Guitarist, and I'm here with the PRS 30th Anniversary Custom 24. Now, I remember getting on a train from Dorset and visiting London to try out my first PRS guitar. This will be hard to imagine for anyone under the age of about 30, but there was no internet, no mobile phones. The only way you could see a new guitar was look at it in a magazine, which was of course Guitarist, and then get on a train or wherever your nearest decent guitar shop was, which for me was 120 miles away, and go and see it. It's very strange to think that it was almost 25 years ago when this guitar's forebear would have been about 5 or 6 years old. That guitar was so exciting then because its radical design, the way it kind of moved on from the traditional designs, solved a lot of problems for those of us struggling with our guitars of the time. It might be because we didn't really understand how to fix them, or just were really looking for something new. Anyway, I remember the excitement, and some of that excitement came back to me when I opened the case on this, because it's got this vintage yellow finish. I remember the ads of the time specifically, where they had the yellow colour, the blue colour and the red colour, and the guitars were all stacked up 3 in a row, and that was a big PRS thing for a long time. So what's really interesting about this guitar is, even though it's 30 years old and PRS is celebrating its anniversary, it's in no way a reissue. The body shape is the same, the contours are much the same as that original guitar. But really, the rest of it has developed. It's still based on the mahogany body, maple top, mahogany neck chassis, as it were. But really, the pickups, the hardware, the tuning pegs, the fret wires remain the same. But the switching systems, the tone controls, most specifically the pickups, has really all changed radically over the years in this continuing sort of evolution of the guitar. So you can read about the specific changes in the guitar and its current specs in issue 391 of Guitarist, but of most interest are the new 8515 pickups. There is a 5-way blade selector, which we'll go through in a sec. New 30th anniversary bird inlays on the neck, obviously the bound fingerboard, and headstock. Okay, there's going to be a full track coming up in a second, but before we do that, I'll just run through the pickup selections. We're running into a PRS amplifier, the Custom 50. It's set on the clean channel, but the clean channel cranks, so it'll just hair up a bit on the end there. Right, this is the bridge pickup. This is position 2, which is the bridge pickup and the inner coil of the neck pickup. This is position 3, which is both humbuckers together. Position 4 is what you might think of as the most Fender-y sound. It's the inner coils of both pickups. And finally, the neck humbucker on its own. Okay, let's hear it in a track.
I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. Make sure you come back next month for more guitar goodness from the people behind Guitarist, Total Guitar and Guitar Techniques magazines, and musicradar.com.